Hey guys, welcome to the selective preparation of Power Mathematical Reasoning. So we're going to go through test 24 today and just go over some questions and hopefully that will make your understanding of this test a bit clearer. Now, let's jump in. Question number 1, and we're dealing with finding the area. Let's have a read of the question. Albert ripped a piece of rectangular cardboard into 3 pieces. The original piece of cardboard can be described as a 4 meter by unknown meter rectangle. Albert loses the middle piece, but then the remaining pieces are broken up into unit squares as shown below. If the total area of the original rectangle is 288 square meters, what is the value of the unknown side? Now, as we read this question, hopefully you guys see that there is a lot of information to take in. And actually, a lot of this, most of this, I'd say 90% of the information is actually not necessary to solve the question. Why? Because if we see the question's asking for what is the value of the unknown side, i.e., if we have this side known to be 4 meter, then, as the question says, it says one side's 4 meter, then all we need to find out is the other side length, right? This is the unknown length. But guys, we already know what the area of this original rectangle is, right? It's 288 square meters. So in fact, we don't need to know what the we don't need to know whether the remaining pieces are broken up. We don't need to know that. We also don't need to know that Albert ripped a piece of rectangular into 3 pieces. We don't need to know that either. In fact, we only just need the second line, that it's a 4 meter by an unknown rectangle. So, if we solve the question, 288 divided by 4 then would give us the other side, because area is length times width, and that would just be 72. So your answer is D. Okay? So there's a little tip at the bottom that I mentioned. Question number 2. Profit or loss? Loretta bought a math textbook for $20 and decided to sell it to her friend for about $27. Then she bought it back for $15 and sold it again for $23. How much did she make or lose after all? Now, assuming that this is profit, and I mean assuming, profit equals to gain minus loss. Okay, this is just what profit means. Gain minus the loss. So if you write down the gains, anything she buys is loss. Because remember, when you buy something, you pay money, so you lose however much you buy. So let's start off with the loss first. I'm going to put a bracket around this just so we can see. So she bought it for $20 and then later she sold it back for $15, but she sold it again for $23. How much did she buy it for? $20, but she also bought it back for $15, meaning that in total she lost $35. Now let's see how much she gained in total. She sold it for $27 initially, and then she sold it again for $23. Okay, now we just do our maths and add it up. We get 50 minus 35. So in total, her profit was $15. Okay, now this is one way to do it. Another way, if I were to write this down, this is way 1. Okay, and in fact, this wouldn't be the way that I would solve it if I were doing the question. Let's have a look at way 2, and I would recommend this way because it's faster. Because we're calculating gain minus loss anyways, if we calculate the profit at each stage of the transaction, then we can skip this couple steps. Okay, what do I mean by that? So Loretta bought a maths book for $20, then decided to sell her friend for $27, meaning that the profit there, I'm going to call that P1 equals to 27 minus 20 equals to $7. Okay, that's profit 1. Profit 2, I'm going to denote that by P2, is going to be 23 minus 15. And how much is that? That's 8. So P1 plus P2, profit 1 profit 2 will give us our net profit, which would be 7 plus 8 then, which is 15. Okay, so doing this in your head, I think way 2 is a lot clearer, but you can also tackle it by adding all of it together and subtracting it, the losses together as well. But anyways, the answer is the same, and you should get option B, make $15. Question number 3, not profit or loss. That should wrong title. Apologies. It should be order. Okay, dealing with order. Should call it dealing with order. Now, question number 9. Mark and Jane decide to go on the theme park. There are 6 themes to visit, P, Q, R, S, T, and U marked on the visitor's map below. They want to start and finish at P, and do not want to visit any of the other spots more than once. So each spot they don't want to visit more than once. Okay. The pathways between the theme spots are linked by lines as shown as above, noting that one-way path is marked by an arrow. Okay, one way if there's an arrow. The correct order to visit all the theme spots is, and we have a bunch of options down there. Now, this seems initially to be a question of trial and error. Okay, try every question, every option, and see which one's the correct one. Okay, whilst this may be a way to answer the question, there is in fact a quicker method of solving it. And this quicker method actually requires you to think with your logic a bit. Now, if she wants to start, and I'm going to start here. If she wants to start and finish, at P, okay? That means if she starts to go from P and then goes to, let's say, U, right? Then that means that if she wants to get back to P, the only way we can get back to P is if we start from Q, because there is only one line that attaches back to Q. Okay? Or on the other hand, we can also say we go from P to Q first, okay? And at the very end, what is their name? Mark and Jane have to come back to U because, right? If they want to end up back in P at the very end, this route is the only way they'll get there. Can you see guys, that there's no other route like this? There is none like that except for U and Q. So whichever we start off with, we have to ignore. But let's start off with P to U. Let's assume that Mark and Jane go to U first. And if it isn't, we'll just do that later. Let's say Mark and Jane go to P and then U. Then we know at the very end, well, I'm going to leave some space here. We have to go to Q and then P, right? Because we have to end at the same place we started. So, and we know Q is the only way to get to P once we leave. So, that's already out of the question. The only letters left then are going to be T, S, and R. Okay, and that's all we need to figure out. T, S, and R. Let's see. If we go from U to R, now we're just going to have a guess. Let's say then we go to T instead. Let's go to T. So we've come from P to U. Then we've gone from U to T. Then let's follow option D. Then T to R. Okay. And then R to S, which is this way. And then S to Q. Look at that. Now, why did I choose option D? It's also not because I knew the answer, but it's because in order to be able to get to Q, right, the only option I can get to Q is through S. Because let's say I went to U and then I went to T. Currently, I have no method of going to R and then going to Q. Because imagine what happens if I go from R to Q instead, right? Then I can't get S. I can't visit the theme park S, can I? So it means that I have to instead go to S first, because S has two lines which we can go through, which is this. Then I can be assured that if Q is the second last option, which I'm assuming it is, then, right, then S must be my third last option. And since we just saw that after going to T, the only other option is going to R, we just put that down as well. And there we have it. We have our answer, P-U-T-R-S-Q-P. P-U-T-R-S-Q-P. That option is only D. Okay? So it's a little bit of trial and error, yes, in the sense that we have some assumptions that we have to follow on. But there are some underlying clues that we use along the way, not just solely trial and error. The first clue was this Q, okay? In order to, if we start from P and end with P, then we have to go to Q otherwise, because there is no other route. Then we saw that next one has to be S, okay? Because S is the only one with two lines connected, with one of them 1 to P. That meaning that one route is to Q. Okay? With one of them being Q. One route being Q. So, that's how we should normally tackle the question. Okay, but if it's more comfortable for you to go with trial and error, with testing by one-on-one, it would take some time though. So I wouldn't advise it, but if it does, then go along with that instead. Let's look into question number 4. Working with discounts and markups. Now, Peter visits a shop. The prices of certain products are shown below. Find the correct order from the least to the most expensive pricing. Now, price A. This question requires us to find out the price of each object. Now, it says 30% off of 75. And guys, remember when I'm working with percentage and especially discounts, if it says 30% off, the amount I'm paying is actually 70% of the original price of the object. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. If an object is 30% off, right, then what remains out of the object's price is 70%. Because remember, the object's whole price used to be 100%. Now, obviously, we don't know how much that actually is in money, in dollars, but we know that in percentage-wise, it used to be 100%. So if it's 30% off, it has to be then 70%. Okay, so instead, I'm just going to calculate 70% of 75 and price B. Now, here's a place that students might trip up. It says 20% up. This is markup, not a discount. This is a markup, meaning that the price goes up. Now, 45% mean 20% of 45. Instead of doing it that way, this time I'm gonna say, actually let's not do that. Let's just go along with 20% of 45, then add the 45 instead. Now, finally for price C, let's have a look. 20% off and then further 10% off. Now guys, I want you to be extremely careful here, because you can't add the 20% and the 10% and say, oh, then what's 30% of 70 and expect that to be the same answer. No. Why? Because the first 20% off is 20% off of $70, right? And then the further 10% off is actually 10% off of how much? 20% off 70. Okay? So the first 20% off is off the 70, but then the 10% off next one is off the 20% off of 70. Okay? So what I'm saying at here is the original price changes, okay? So obviously the amount changes as well. Amount of discount is going to change as well. So we can't do that. Instead, can do is work step by step. 20% off of 70% is the same thing as saying what is 80% of $70, and then adding that with 10% off finding 10%. Oh, actually, let's say if it's 10% off, guys, then it's 90% off. Actually, since this is difficult, we'll just do it step by step. And then find plus. Then find 10% of that. Okay, let's approach it this way. Now, price A. 70% of 75, that's just 70 over 100 times 75. If we work that out, that is actually, if we cross it out, 21, 5, 15. We can cancel it again. 4, 3, so 210 divided by 4. 5, 52. This is 52.5, I believe. Let me just quickly check. 4, 5, 20, 10 to, yep, 82.5. Okay, cool. So that's that. That's for price A. Price B. 20% of 45 is 1/5 of 45. Because remember, 20%, guys, is 20 over 100, and 20 over 100 simplified is 1/5. So I'm just saying 1/5 of 45. And then plus 45, because remember this is 20% up from the original price. So that's 9 plus 45, which ends up being 54. Now price C, let's have a look. 80% of 70, what is that? 80 over 100 times 70, yes. What do we get? We get 56. Then 10% of that, 10% of 56 is 5.6. But since it's 10% off of 56, we 56 minus 5.6, okay? So we do that, we get 50.4. Now comparing the prices together, then we find that price C is in fact the smallest, then it's price A, then it's price B. So in the order of things, it's going to be C less than A, which is less than B. Okay? This is talking about prices. So the answer has to be D. Now, let's move on to the key points. Question point 1, ensure you understand the question and not the story. Where am I speaking from? I'm actually speaking from this area question we initially did. The area question where 90% of the story was irrelevant, or the question was irrelevant, right? So ensure that you understand the question, which was at the very last paragraph. So that's my tip. But point 2, eliminate options that cannot be by finding what the option has to be. Now, obviously, that sounds easy and straightforward, but in the question 3, right, we eliminated a lot of the other options by straight away going into what we have to do. So to find if we have to end up in P, and we go initially with U, then we have to end up second last option at Q in order to be able to make it to P afterwards, okay? So I found out from that the second last option has to be Q. So things like that. Eliminate what cannot be by finding what the option has to be, okay? And point number 3, instead of finding percentage that is taken off, find the percentage remaining. Right, what do I mean by that? Here, in this question, remember how in price A, it's at 30% off, right? Instead of finding what 30% off of 75 is, and then subtracting that 30% off, then, instead of doing that, just find the 70% of 75, which is so much easier. Because remember, if I take 30% off, then I have 70% left. Okay, so that's what I'm finding, because remember, it's a discount. So that's one tip there as well that will save you a lot of time.